In the corridors here in Geneva, we always reach out to those women who are in leadership positions and who are in diplomacy and who are making it happen, who make it happen in closed sessions with ministers, with heads of states, who make it happen with us in civil society, and who also made it happen for us to be here and supporting our conversations. It's my pleasure to introduce and invite the Canadian Ambassador and Permanent Representative here to the United Nations in Geneva, my sister and colleague and friend, Elissa Golberg, to share with us. And just to say, you know what? Go for it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you,
Over to you.
You've never known me not to go for it. So I'm also going to sit here so that you're not kind of awkwardly turning that way, because some of you I know are kind of squirming your necks. So I'm just going to stay put here. I want to start by saying I really welcome this opportunity to be in this room with such fantastic and phenomenal committed individuals, both women and men, who are committed collectively to advancing our shared objectives around the Beijing Platform for Action. You know, Beijing was foundational for many of us who now occupy senior leadership positions, and in particular, its unapologetic call for equality and empowerment. I know that over the last few days, you've discussed in depth all that's been achieved in fulfilling the promises and the aspirations that were set out in Beijing, but you've also talked about how much is left to do. And I think we all know that there's a lot that's left in the unfinished column. And really, although we know that the progress that we've made together is significant, it's been uneven. It's uneven across issues and occupations. It's uneven across regions, countries, and communities. And if you give me just a couple of minutes, my own domain of diplomacy is one of those areas where we can see this uneven progress being quite evident. As a Canadian, I'm certainly grateful for the generation of women that preceded me and broke barriers in our own foreign service. Until 1971, for instance, female foreign service officers had to retire or change occupations if they got married, and there were limited opportunities for senior appointments. My generation is the first generation that in many ways takes for granted our ability to compete for leadership roles on an equal footing with our male counterparts, and not just for human resources or corporate affairs positions. But where policies are being put in place, such as maternity and parental leave, benefits, and other policies that enable women to retain their positions, but also to succeed in their careers, but also in their home life. But we're still lagging. Ambassadorial appointments were at about 35%. There's only one woman in a G7 position, so these are things that we're working on. I'm the first woman permanent representative to the United Nations in Geneva, ever. But I'm reflective of my broader cohort of women ambassadors here in Geneva. We make up only about 48 out of over 200 ambassadorial positions that are here at the moment. And in this respect, I would say that my colleagues and I are very aware that we have to serve as role models and mentors for women who are looking forward to a career in diplomacy. In Geneva, we've organized events for staff at younger levels so that they can create their networks and begin to establish themselves. But we've also worked with Naradzai and with other colleagues to be able to do larger initiatives such as the Power of Empowered Women event, which aims to showcase women from diverse backgrounds that have excelled in political, economic, and social spheres, who've moved their national debates forward and have broken down traditional negative stereotypes and have promoted equality to help demonstrate women's leadership and achievement, because unfortunately in Geneva, often when we talk about women's human rights and women's empowerment, it's women as victims. We're talking about women in the context of the Human Rights Council, and women as not actors or empowered actors, but as individuals who need things done for them. And that's very much a dynamic that the other women ambassadors and I have been seeking to change. And the value for young women in seeing women in leadership roles can't be underestimated. It's a simple message, frankly. It's if they did it, I can do it too. And so while our experiences as women may be different, depending on our country of origin, class, ethnicity, or many other factors, what unites us collectively in this room and around the world is our determination to remove obstacles and create opportunities that will allow women and girls to achieve their full potential, and in doing so, enable our societies to achieve peace, security, justice, and prosperity. But as long as discrimination and violence continue to jeopardize women's health, their access to education, and the enjoyment of their human rights, it will be difficult for us to achieve the kind of empowerment and effective representation in leadership roles that we all want to achieve. And if I can just pick up on the point that was raised earlier, this is an agenda that has to be pursued in partnership with men. Men need to feel that they're part of the solution. And so it's a two-way street in that respect. There needs to be engagement and a hand reached out to them, but we also have to, as Naradzai suggested, responsibilize our men and boys. And so for the next couple of minutes, what I'd like to do is respond to a question that Naradzai had posed before the panel, which is where do we want to go from here? And I want to focus on three particular areas where I think that our joint efforts can pay really important dividends as we go forward. I want to talk about empowerment of girls. I want to talk about women's political and economic empowerment, and I want to talk finally about women's leadership in peace and security. So first, we have to prioritize the empowerment of girls, but also make sure that girls and boys have visible, positive, and capable role models, as I've just noted, and the ability to challenge stereotypes. I know that in this forum you've spent a lot of time focusing on this issue over the last few days, so there's only two key barriers that I want to highlight for you, and I'm cheating a little bit because I'm trying to influence your next session on recommendations. So the first one that I want to flag is ending child, early, and forced marriage. This is a practice that primarily affects girls and adolescent girls where they're especially at risk, and it's got devastating consequences, and I know that this is an issue that you're familiar with. Inclusion of a standalone target on child early forced marriage in the post-2015 development agenda would significantly reduce the prevalence of this harmful practice. The second and related barrier that we need to overcome is ensuring universal birth registration and vital statistics, CRVS. I'm going to say this again, CRVS, CRVS, CRVS. It's an acronym people are afraid of. I don't know why. But if we're going to tackle, for instance, the issue of child early forced marriage, we actually have to be able to know how old the bride is, right? We have to know this in order to be able to determine whether or not she's married. And in order to get a marriage license, you often need a birth certificate. Absence of a birth certificate or other critical registration systems can impede access to education, and we know that education is one of the best tools for empowerment. It can impact on our ability to have access to adequate health care, another element in empowerment and sustainability. Never mind the myriad of other ways that it affects our daily life, our ability to have a bank account, our ability to get a passport, our ability to register for votes. So civil registration and vital statistics should be on your agenda. And if it's not, I hope I just put it on there. My second basket of actions is related to women's political and economic empowerment. And here, frankly, the data is overwhelming and compelling. Data from the International Parliamentary Union, the World Bank, the IMF, the OECD. It's not that we're lacking the data that tells us that our failures to improve women's participation in decision-making, to ensure their legitimate political interests are addressed, and to increase women's access to capital and economic opportunity is holding back growth, competitiveness, and sustainability. Concretely, we know that there's a range of actions that we can take to encourage the political, social, and changes in attitude that we all need to be pursuing. This includes engaging opinion shapers at the local level. It means supporting grassroots civic engagement that enables women to take part in policy development and decision-making, or reinforcing tools such as those that the IPU has developed in order to encourage women's participation in formal political processes. And political engagement can't just be confined to peacetime. We tend to silo out our discussions about women's engagement once violence starts or once a crisis happens. This is even more important time when women's voices need to be heard. So it's equally important that we ensure that women's political agency in crises, in peace processes, and in the rebuilding process, notably institutions that are being reformed or newly developed, are front and center. Political processes have to reflect a balanced gender perspective and respond to the needs of the entire community. On the economic side, again, here, there are a number of things that we know we can do in order to address some of the obstacles we're facing. We have to change economic policies, laws, and institutions, addressing core issues like property rights, inheritance, improved access to finance, skills development, and this includes enabling women and girls to have access to non-traditional areas and occupations. And to be clear, these are issues that we're all grappling with. This past June in Canada, for instance, the Minister of the Status of Women released a roadmap of how Canada is going to seek to improve its representation of women on public and private sector boards. We hope that companies will set a goal to have 30% female board members within 5 years. And this is a country that has a relatively well-established focus on ensuring women and men's empowerment. And we are also setting a target, and we hope that others will do likewise. And we know that we're following a number of other countries that have already sought to do this. And so again here for this basket, the post-2015 development agenda represents a rare opportunity for us to pull together both the issues related to economic empowerment and political empowerment in a comprehensive way. We certainly strongly support the inclusion of a standalone goal on the empowerment of women and girls, which focuses on the structural drivers of this inequality, and that can have a multiplier force, as was noted, across the other development goals that have been established. And so this brings me to my last basket. The final basket that I want to touch on is related to women, peace, and security. And again, I know that you've spent a lot of time focusing on this over the last couple of days, so I'm just going to focus on one core item, and that's halting sexual violence and conflict, ensuring accountability for perpetrators, and supporting survivors, including ensuring that they receive assistance needed so that they can reintegrate into their families and communities and lead healthy and productive lives. There's a building international momentum on this issue, and that's incredibly important. It's bringing more attention and resources to address this problem than we've ever had before. The commitments that were made by countries at the Global Summit on the prevention of sexual violence and conflict, the steps that were made by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to ensure systematic and meaningful inclusion of SGBV experts on commissions of inquiry and fact-finding missions, and here I'll just put in parenthesis, that's the Canadian-led Violence Against Women resolution. The work that the Security Council and the UN special mechanisms are doing on this issue are all significant steps forward. But it's still not enough. We have to ensure that these abuses and violations are acknowledged and tackled within the mainstream discussion on conflict where sexual violence is perpetrated, and continue to ensure that it's an important element in the context of the wider women, peace, and security agenda. We also have to acknowledge that in many instances, the violence that occurs in conflict contexts has its roots in pre-existing gender inequality and stereotypes. So I've spoken for far too long. I really appreciate your indulgence. Our list of things to do is long, and we have to reinforce each other in making sure that we are moving towards continuous progress. You know, Christine Lagarde has said recently, and if you haven't been reading Christine's blogs, I encourage you to do so. They're extraordinarily empowering in their own right. But Christine Lagarde said recently, "Today the world faces complex economic and political challenges. The issues that we're facing are only going to get bigger. And so the status quo of inequality won't be enough to meet these challenges. We need our girls and boys empowered. We need women and men at the table together, positively engaged in society, and working together to encourage sustainable growth, prosperity, and stability." I can certainly assure Niradza and assure my colleagues that you can count on Canada to be part of these efforts along with our colleagues in civil society and with other governments, international organizations, and the private sector to make sure that we continue to keep women's empowerment and human rights on the agenda. So thank you.
Actually, I almost fell off my chair when she mentioned that many years ago, if I was Canadian, I would have had to choose whether to get married or to remain in foreign service. I'm like being forced into a pledge of celibacy. And at the same time, very excited, and your clear recommendations on some of the issues which you are grappling with, definitely in my everyday work at the World YWCA, it's clear. We have to take doable actions, including on doable solutions on issues like child marriage. So thank you for raising very concrete, doable solutions on how we make it happen. It's not about rhetoric, it's about doable solutions to critical issues that are facing us.